One morning, out of the blue, my father-in-law, who I lived with, passed away. To be honest, since he always ignored me, I didn't feel sad at all. My mother-in-law and Rick went ahead to prepare the venue, and as I was getting ready, I overheard Bob making a phone call in the hallway. I married her out of pity because she couldn't have children. Basically, it was a charity case. I gasped. And yet she's so arrogant and annoying. She's just a housekeeper, but she acts like she's Rick's mother. Then, he chuckled. I'll make her cover the donation for the funeral. With that money, I'll buy you a luxury bag you wanted, right, Moira? He didn't even know I was listening in the hallway, but he kept talking. While feigning calm, my body trembled with anger. I'm going to put an end to this. This guy was not my family or anything. I was going to vent all the frustration I'd been holding back. He was so wrong to think that I would always be obedient to him. My name is Lisa, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Bob 11 years ago, and since then, I've lived with him, his son Rick, and my in-laws. Bob and I met through a mutual friend. I was heartbroken after my fiancé broke up with me over my infertility, and seeing me down, a friend gathered some acquaintances and organized a drinking party. Bob was a man of few words but seemed sincere. We hit it off talking about movies, and he initiated a serious relationship with the intent to marry. His ex-wife was into gambling, accumulated debt, and ran away, leaving behind her young son. Hearing that he was looking for a mother for his son, I met Rick on our few dates later. Rick, innocent and sociable, quickly grew fond of me. His grandparents, whom I met later, seemed like nice people, and by the time we'd been dating a year, I strongly wanted to become part of Bob's family. But in retrospect, Bob and his parents were only putting on an act in front of me. I was completely deceived and began living with Bob and Rick after a modest wedding. Right after we married, Bob asked me to become a housewife. I liked my office job and wanted to continue, but Bob persuaded me earnestly. I want you to focus properly on Rick. Once he's a bit older, you can go back to work. Okay. I understood Bob's concern. I was, after all, new to parenting. I was also anxious about whether I could properly raise someone else's child. I desperately gathered information about parenting from friends with kids, the internet, and books. Initially, Rick seemed to grow fond of me, but as he grew older and developed his own personality, he began to talk back to me. Instead of comforting me, Bob would mock me with a half smile. It's no good without the real mother. After all, you're just a stranger. Stop it. Why would you say something like that? When I objected, Bob frowned as if puzzled. It's the truth. What's wrong with saying it? Bob was always out, either at work or with colleagues at drinking parties. He left all the parenting to me and was only sarcastic when he spoke. And whenever Rick's behavior bothered him, he blamed it all on me. He's a crybaby because of Lisa's poor parenting. Another cold? Probably due to malnutrition. It's because you let him eat TV dinner for lunch. He became irritable when he tried teaching Rick multiplication soon after he just learned addition. He's just learned addition. Multiplication is too soon for him. When I protested, Bob laughed dismissively. I was able to study for junior high school when I was in elementary school. Looks like Lisa's stupidity has rubbed off on him. Glaring at me, he grinned. You're just a high school grad, after all. When Rick was in 3rd grade, we unexpectedly began living with my in-laws. This sudden decision was due to my mother-in-law's declining health, even though there had been no prior discussion about it. I was told I have high blood pressure during my physical exam. I have to visit the doctor for a while and receive treatment with medication and diet. Bob asked his mother, who was feeling down, to move in with him. Mom, you should move in with us. You don't drive, so it's hard for you to go to the clinic, isn't it? Let Lisa drive you to and from the clinic. I was taken aback when I overheard this. Why was he using me to perform acts of filial piety without offering to help himself? And he hadn't even asked me. Oh, really? That would be a great help. I've been worried about how to afford the remodeling of our house. That's great. Once you've finished the procedures to sell your house, you can move in any time, Bob said, acting as if he owned the place. I was dumbfounded by Bob's presumptuous attitude. This house was my inheritance from my parents, right? After hanging up the phone, Bob casually told me. So yeah, my parents are moving in. You take care of everything, okay? I take care of everything? Wait, ask me first and don't just decide on your own. You know what, this is my house. Bob looked displeased. You don't want to live with my parents? I don't mean it. My wife is supposed to take care of her husband's mother, which is quite natural, right? You've got a lot of free time anyway. So at least be useful. My opinions were completely ignored, and soon they moved in with us. Living together, I ended up being bossed around by my mother-in-law. Because of bad weather, or feeling sluggish, or even not in the good mood. She didn't want to go to the clinic for such reasons. Then shall we cancel? Are you fine with my illness getting worse? What a terrible daughter-in-law. If I persistently suggested we should go, she'd snap. You're annoying. Once I finally got her in the car, it was nothing but complaints. Your driving is too rough. Drive safe. Don't drive too slow. Go faster. As soon as we got home, she'd sit on the sofa and start grumbling. I got carsick because of your terrible driving. Why are you so bad at this? She could use the bus that goes right from the nearest stop to the front of the clinic, but she probably thought the fare was too expensive. Not only about doctor appointments, but even at home, she continued to complain. This house is so old-fashioned. Are you sure it's been remodeled? It's not suited for 2 generations living together, it feels uncomfortable. She would say things like this, even though she came barging into my house. Meanwhile, my father-in-law had his own peculiar ways. Though he didn't join in when Bob or his mother criticized me, which made me think he was on my side, it seemed he just wanted to avoid conflict. Blatantly, he never responded to my greetings, and when he had something to ask me, it was minimal, like breakfast? Laundry? He seemed to want nothing to do with me, and when I wondered where he was always off to, it turned out to be either gambling or horse racing. With all that free time, I desperately wished he would drive his wife to her appointments. He should take care of his own wife. Moreover, my mother-in-law was selective about the meals I prepared. My in-laws preferred lightly seasoned, fish-based dishes. But Bob and Rick liked strong flavors, so I had to prepare different meals for them. As if that wasn't hard enough, my mother-in-law was on a low-sodium diet, so I ended up having to make 3 different meals for 5 people. Oblivious to the daily stress this caused me, my mother-in-law continued to complain. The flavor is too bland. I can't eat something this terrible. This must be your way of harassing me. What a sly daughter-in-law. A low-sodium diet inevitably results in blander flavors. Please bear with it. Then, my mother-in-law would go crying to Bob. Bob, Lisa is terrible. My mother-in-law complained, causing Bob to glare. Hey, cook better meals for her, okay? Why don't you cook if you're going to complain? I retorted out of desperation. Oh my. How dare a wife talk back to her husband like that, my mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes widening. Anyway, please bear with the bland food. Always making excuses for your bad cooking. She forced me to cook meals for the family because she herself was not a good cook. Yet, she never seemed to have a shred of gratitude for me. I gradually became disappointed with Bob, who always sided with his mother. One day, while walking back from shopping, I stopped when I heard my mother-in-law's voice. Curious about the conversation, I was shocked to discover she was talking bad about me to the neighbors. Our daughter-in-law is so defiant. She lives off Bob's salary, yet has the nerve to talk back to us. Does she even know her position she is taking? Really? She just lazes around at home, avoids housework, and dumps all the cleaning and laundry on me. She does nothing. Hidden behind a fence, I was dumbfounded. Since moving in, my mother-in-law hadn't even washed a single cup. It seems you picked a dud with the new daughter-in-law, too. Yes, and it's bad for Rick's upbringing. Bob is one thing, but the grandson is the real victim here. Poor thing. With a tone of pity from the neighbors, my mother-in-law dramatically lamented. See, I'm sensitive, right? I'm stressed out being bossed around by my daughter-in-law. My stomach hurts. You've had it tough. You mustn't push yourself. It all made sense now. No wonder the neighbors had been avoiding me lately. Clutching my fists, I calmed my rage and took a long detour home. That evening, I confronted Bob about his mother's behavior. Don't you think it's too much for her to spread rumors? She was just going along with what the neighbors said. Bob displayed a look of annoyance. You just need to improve your cooking skills. I'm doing my best already. Just try to get along, okay? I was driven by a feeling of helpless anger. Do I have to endure being spoken to like this every day? As Rick entered his teenage years and hit puberty, he naturally began to mock me, having grown up seeing Bob and my in-laws look down on me. He bombarded me with harsh words. Wash my gym clothes by today. I need them tomorrow. Stuffing leftovers into my lunchbox? That's lazy. You're a full-time housewife with nothing else to do, so make it properly. I hate this brand of curry mix. You should know my preferences by now. You're useless. Despite relying on me for everything, he constantly found faults. Incredibly, he even kicked me out of the house when his friends came over. Go away, you're an eyesore. It'd be fine if you were pretty, but having an old lady like you around is embarrassing. This is my house. Don't get cocky. You're on my dad's salary, aren't you? Bob and my in-laws, standing nearby, showed no sign of concern. Fed up, I finally scolded Rick. If you behave like that, I won't take care of you anymore. Abandoning a child's care? That's a failure of a mother. Rick lashed out in anger. Then Bob intervened with a look of annoyance. Lisa, don't react to every word the kid says. It's not wise. I'm correcting him because he's being disrespectful to adults. I protested loudly, seizing the moment to express my grievances. Hey, why don't you get more involved with Rick as a father? I'm providing for the family, isn't that enough? Bob retorted, glaring at me with arrogance. You only get to relax every day because of me. You can't even earn money, so the least you could do is serve my family. He yelled at me loudly. Otherwise, there's no reason to keep you around in this house. If you don't like it, we can get a divorce. I'll throw you out right now. You're a failure who can't even have kids. I felt like crying. He was a man who could say such terrible things with no hesitation. Behind Bob, Rick and my mother-in-law looked at me with malicious grins. Then I'll start working. I can contribute to society too. Working from home should be fine, right? Who would even hire you? If you slack off on the housework, I'll make you quit right away. After such exchanges, I decided to start working from home. Having worked in sales administration until a few years ago, I was skilled with computer tasks. I registered with a crowdsourcing company, and as I built my track record, I eventually started receiving constant requests. I worked from the bedroom. During the late night to early morning hours when my family was asleep. Lately, Bob moved a bed into the study room and slept there alone, so I could use the computer late at night without any complaints. Ideally, I wanted to work in the sunny living room during the day, but that was nearly impossible since my mother-in-law was glued to the TV all day, watching talk shows and daytime dramas. By the time Rick started high school, my work had stabilized, and I was able to save a consistent amount each month. One morning, as usual, my mother-in-law went to wake up her husband and came down to the kitchen looking horrified. While I was preparing breakfast and Bob and Rick were drinking tea at the dining table, she trembled as she spoke. He's... What? We all rushed to the bedroom where we found my father-in-law had passed away in his sleep. It was chaos after that. Bob took over for the panicked mother-in-law, calling their family doctor to issue a death certificate, arranging the funeral with the funeral home, and handling all the other official procedures. Seeing my usually assertive mother-in-law in a dazed state, I felt a bit of pity. But that feeling was quickly blown away. Watching me continue with cleaning, laundry, and meal preparation as usual, my mother-in-law sneered nastily. How can you be so nonchalant after everything father did for you? Don't you have a heart? As I was setting the plates on the table, I looked at my mother-in-law with disdain and sighed quietly. I could say this confidently. I have never once felt taken care of by my father-in-law since getting married. Being around him always made me feel like I was ignored out of existence, which was unpleasant. So, although it felt strange that he was suddenly gone, but I didn't miss him in the slightest. Well, as a daughter-in-law, I'll attend the funeral and fulfill my duty. With that thought, I went upstairs to the closet to get my morning clothes and prepare my bag and accessories. Rick and my mother-in-law left the house a little ahead of us, saying they were preparing for the ceremony. As I was going down the stairs in my morning clothes, I heard Bob's voice. It seemed he was talking to someone on his phone. Yeah, my dad suddenly. So, I've been really busy. I'll be a bit late seeing you tonight. Sorry, I know today is our special day, though. I felt uneasy. Despite appearing sorrowful in front of his mother, his voice was too cheerful for someone whose father had just passed away. What? You're asking why I married such a boring woman? Bob laughed as he explained on the phone. I married her out of pity because she couldn't have children. Basically, it was a charity case. I gasped in shock. And yet, she's so arrogant and annoying. She's just a housekeeper, but she acts like she's Rick's mother. He chuckled at that. I'll make her cover the donation for the funeral. With that money, I'll buy you a luxury bag you wanted, right, Moira? He continued speaking in an upbeat tone, unaware that I was listening in the hallway. When I appeared at the end of the call, he was momentarily startled but quickly put on a smile. Oh, you were here? Yes. Aren't you leaving yet? I'm about to head out. Want a ride? Maybe I will. While maintaining my composure, my body trembled with rage. As I put on my black pumps, I muttered to myself. I would end this. This person was neither family nor anything else to me. I was going to vent all the frustration I've been holding back. He was so wrong to think that I would always be obedient to him. The next morning, as I sat serenely on a one-seater sofa, sipping my tea, my phone rang. It was from Bob. Since the early morning, he had been calling me every few minutes. He also bombarded me with text messages. I had read them but didn't reply, which probably made him switch to calling. Sighing, I answered the phone, and Bob started ranting quickly. Hey, where are you? The funeral is about to start. Oh, is that so? It has nothing to do with me. Bob exploded in anger as I replied nonchalantly. What? Stop joking and come here now. You disappeared from the viewing, and when I thought you'd gone home, you vanished. Calmly, I replied to the frantic Bob. That's impossible. There's rush hour traffic, and it would take over 2 hours by car. I sent a photo taken from the window to Bob's phone, and he shouted. Where are you right now? I'm at a hotel in the neighboring city. I've always wanted to try their breakfast buffet. Food made by someone else is the best. Skipping a family funeral for a hotel stay? Are you out of your mind? I responded coldly to Bob's howling. Oh, I thought I was just a housekeeper, not family. I have no obligation to attend the funeral. Bob fell silent. After a brief pause, he told his mother and Rick. Mom, Rick, just wait here for a moment. Footsteps echoed. It seemed like he was moving through the funeral venue's hallway. Eventually, the footsteps stopped, and Bob spoke again. First off, give me your bank account number. Why? I have to give the money as a donation to the priest. Are you saying that because you spent the funds, I should cover it for you? After a moment of being speechless, Bob yelled in desperation. Yes. I know you've been saving up. You can easily put out $10,000, right? If I give it, it won't come back, right? Handle it yourself. You, how dare you talk to me? Bob's flustered voice came through the phone. A wife should just obey her husband without complaining. A wife isn't a slave. Besides, both you and your mother are stuck in the past. I scoffed at Bob. Anyway, why don't you just be honest with your mother? She's lenient with you, she might just give it to you smoothly. At my words, Bob's voice suddenly became quieter. No, that's impossible. If she finds out I spent the funeral money on a woman, she'd definitely get angry. I twisted my lips in a smirk. Even he was afraid of his mother. Served him right. You brought this on yourself. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now. Bob was still shouting something as I hung up the phone. If it was too hard for him to speak up, I would just tell them myself. If I were to post the story about Bob spending the money on a woman on a social networking site shared by the family, it would be seen by Rick and my mother-in-law. After that, Bob kept calling frantically, so, annoyed, I dashed to a mobile phone company's storefront. "Hi, how can we help you today? I want to cancel my mobile plan right now." "All right, please wait for a moment." After canceling my mobile service and changing my number, I was filled with a sense of relief. I returned to the hotel and strolled leisurely through the nearby town, feeling relaxed. Ever since getting married, I had been required to report my plans for going out and my return time to Bob. And he would even call during my outings to demand, "Come home soon." I hadn't thought much of it before, but now I realize how severe the restrictions were. Bob must be in a panic right now, unable to contact me. Sounded good. I thought I would just ignore him forever. Wrapped in a refreshing sense of freedom, I enjoyed shopping at my leisure. On the day of the 30-day memorial mass, I visited the church. It was a weekday, 30 days since my father-in-law had passed away. My mother-in-law had mentioned having the service on the preceding Sunday morning. I spotted Bob's car parked in the church parking lot. It was likely lined up alongside the cars of other relatives. I opened the gate and walked across the cobblestone path towards the building. Listening carefully, I could hear the sound of casual conversation. The mass had ended, and people were relaxing, having tea and snacks. "Hello, everyone. Long time no see." I greeted as I opened the entrance door, and for a moment, the room fell silent before a wave of criticism burst forth. "Lisa. How could you skip the viewing and the funeral? It was your husband's father's funeral. What were you thinking? Your own father has passed away, so he was like a real parent to you." I smiled coldly. "Well, I've been labeled just a housekeeper, you know." As I casually threw this sarcastic comment and glanced at Bob, he glared at me with intense eyes. "I did my best to serve your father and your mother. I tried to fulfill my role as Rick's mother, doing my best in my own way," I continued. I looked around at my mother-in-law, Bob, and Rick, and shrugged. "But according to Bob, I'm just a housekeeper. A mere housekeeper shouldn't attend funerals, right?" So, I refrained. "I never said that." Bob's voice cracked. I exhaled softly and pressed the play button on the recording app on my phone. The conversation I had overheard on the stairs played loudly in the quiet room. As Bob turned pale, I delivered the final blow. "So, now that the funeral is over, did your mother end up covering the donation?" "What?" In front of the stunned relatives, Bob and his mother exchanged glances before awkwardly looking away. "Oh, Lisa, what are you talking about? There's no way I could spend $10,000 overnight. Don't say such ridiculous things." Bob laughed awkwardly, but I swiped my finger across my phone screen. "I found this. You two look cozy together, is she an acquaintance? To boldly show your face like that, you're really fearless, aren't you?" The image I displayed made Bob freeze. It was a photo of a woman closely snuggling up to a man. Their eyes were hidden, but the man was dressed in a dark suit and black tie. Furthermore, the woman had commented. Bob rushed over during the viewing. He said our date was more important than saying goodbye to his dad. "I'm so happy. He bought me the $10,000 bag I had been nagging him about at the luxury shop." Cute, isn't it? As Bob tried to snatch the phone from me, I pushed his hand away and held it high for the other relatives to see. "I searched all over social media for Moira, who you mentioned. Surely, it's not a coincidence that all this matches up, and she's not a stranger. Right?" Seeing no way out, Bob's face wore a frightened expression and he fell silent. Even Rick, who usually sides with his father, was at a loss for words. The relatives all at once began to criticize Bob. "So you left the viewing to go see your mistress? Unbelievable." The relatives who had been silent so far couldn't hold back any longer and started shouting. "So you bought a luxury bag with the funeral donation? You rushed out before the funeral started to withdraw money from the bank, didn't you? What a disgraceful son." "Shut up. It was our first date in a month. And since Mom covered the money, it's all settled, right?" Bob defiantly retorted. The date was more important to me than the funeral. It would be a big problem if I stood her up and got dumped. Cut me some slack. Even his mother was shocked. Bob. What are you talking about? Oh, isn't it nice to be honest? Smiling, I then showed Rick's bank statement, which I had brought from home, to everyone to see. With such brazen cheating and saying it's more important than his own father, it's no surprise he'd dip into his son's savings. Rick, peeking at the statement, suddenly wore a look of despair. It's empty. This can't be true. He turned to Bob, accusing him furiously. Did you dip into my savings, Dad? You're the only one who knows the PIN. You knew I had been saving my allowance since Mom was around, right? Bob, shamelessly grinning, responded. Well, I tried to use Lisa's money, but I couldn't figure out the PIN. You sure had saved up quite a bit. That's my boy. Don't joke around. Is that what a father does? Rick screamed, tears in his eyes. I don't want to call you my father anymore. I'm cutting ties with you right now. Bob's mother tried to calm the enraged Rick. Rick, you have to forgive him. Thanks to your father, we have a good life every day, don't we? Why don't you give a little to your father? My money was probably given to his mistress, too. It's okay to give gifts, but use your own money. Why are you messing with my money? Rick voiced a completely reasonable question. And the same goes for Grandpa's donations. You usually mock her so much that it makes no sense to ask her to pay for it. Just pay that much yourself. You can't pay for it because you don't have any money. I said, chuckling while looking at Bob. Judging from your social media, you've been giving her expensive gifts every time you meet. The reason you divorced your previous wife was also because of you having an affair, right? When I pointed this out, Bob and his mother grimaced in silence. From Rick's reaction, it seemed he had been kept in the dark. What a nasty woman. Did you even research the cause of the divorce? I sneered at Bob, who looked uncomfortable. I thought I'd hear about your past, so I contacted your best friend through an acquaintance, and boy did I get some juicy stories. Just then, I received a message on my phone, so I stood up. Excuse me for a moment. I'm going to pick up a guest. After excusing myself from his relatives, I walked out of the dressing room to the church entrance. When I returned with a couple, Bob gasped. Hi, Kevin, and even Moira. Sorry, Bob. Kevin found out about us. Looking back and forth between the discouraged Moira and the furious Kevin, Bob spoke in a trembling voice. Kevin, calm down. You're mistaken. We aren't having an affair. It's no use, Bob. I spoke with a look of disbelief. Kevin, I found the messages between Bob and Moira on his phone. I even hired a detective agency to investigate thoroughly. Oh. So there's no escaping this. Kevin glared straight at Bob with bloodshot eyes. Even though you have a bad track record with women, you were my best friend and I trusted you. I can't believe you secretly met her in a hotel the day after we went drinking. And you kept sneaking into my house while I was away on business trips, didn't you? With a vein throbbing in his temple, Kevin shouted resentfully. I should have never introduced you to her. But... Right? Moira and I, it was fate that we met. Bob grinned mischievously. I'm more suitable for Moira than you are. Ha. Stop talking nonsense. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Bob pursed his lips. I married a boring older woman, while you got to marry a young and pretty woman. Plus, Moira told me it was love at first sight with me. Bob laughed heartily, as Kevin clenched his fist. As you wish. I'll divorce Moira. You'll be paying alimony. I don't have that kind of money. I've already spent a lot on Moira. I can barely afford to pay my ex-wife. Bob spoke defiantly. Well, but I'll pay you with the inheritance I'll get from my father. Right, Mom? Bob smiled broadly, while his mother-in-law quietly said. There's no such thing. What? If we had money, we wouldn't have moved in with you guys. We'd have renovated our own house and lived there. My mother-in-law spoke gravely. It made sense. I nodded too. My mother-in-law hadn't chosen to live with them out of preference, but out of dire necessity. But, you were saving up for retirement, right? Bob showed signs of panic, to which his mother-in-law sadly shook her head. After retiring, your father misused it on gambling and horse racing. He even dipped into his pension for gambling and borrowed the rest. So there's no inheritance. Bob turned pale and screamed. Oh no, give me a break. I moved in with you thinking I'd get a hefty inheritance. Then his mother showed a hint of anger. Did you mean it? Of course. Otherwise, why would I bother calling my parents here? It's such a hassle. Bob spat out irritably. Ah, all the living expenses I covered for you, all for nothing. Might as well have thrown it down the drain. Disappointment appeared on my mother-in-law's face. All you care about is money, don't you? I can't help it, I'm my father's son. Moira, who had been listening to everything, gave a thin smile. So, I dated you because you graduated from a better university and work for a famous company. How disappointing. She approached the frozen Bob and told him firmly. Thanks for all the gifts. Bye now. What? Hey, we're not done here. Moira. Kevin chased after Moira, heading out the front door. Poor thing, you got dumped. No inheritance and even your affair partner turned away from you. Talk about a double whammy. I smiled kindly at Bob. Looks like it's going to be tough paying alimony to both Kevin and me. Well, do your best. Hey, Lisa, wait. As I was about to leave, Bob arrogantly tried to stop me. How are you going to live after we divorce with your low salary? I don't really need a divorce. If you do the housework, I might let you stay in the house as before. I exploded in anger at Bob's arrogance. Enough. Who do you think you are? Normally quiet, I raised my voice, and Bob, along with Rick and my mother-in-law, were all shocked. This is my house, isn't it? I'm the one letting you three stay there. And for the record, the only reason the house functioned was because I did all the housework. Can't you even understand that? Lisa, calm down. You've ridiculed me endlessly, but if you can't understand even that, it speaks volumes about your intelligence. As I scoffed at Bob, the relatives began to chuckle softly. I've been offered a full-time position at the company I used to work for. I can make it on my own. You should be more worried about yourself. Drowning in debt. That's right, Dad. We're the ones in real trouble. Rick tried to stop me in a panicked tone. Come on, we're family. If you become a full-timer, put some of your salary into the household. Otherwise, we're going bankrupt. Rick pleaded in a pitiful voice, and my mother-in-law agreed. Planning to run away, even though you're a daughter-in-law? It's time you did something useful for us. I turned to the three of them and said coldly. Have you forgotten how you've treated me all this time? There's no room for a maid in this scenario. Lisa. Family of three, you'd better help each other out. And you'll need to move out of the house soon. I greeted the watching relatives and then left the church. When I returned to the hotel, I sent Bob a copy of the signed divorce petition. I plan to stay in the hotel until those three move out of the house. Although they moved out quietly, Bob was reluctant to pay alimony for a long time. I want to settle, but she forcefully pushed for the divorce, he would complain. If this petition goes to court, it will cost extra. Are you okay with that? Persuaded by his lawyer? Bob finally gave in and transferred the alimony to my account. To pay the alimony to both Kevin and me, he piled up debt, and his income from the company wasn't enough, so he started working part-time as well. Bob apparently explained the reason for our divorce as conflicting differences to his boss and colleagues. However, since a friend of Kevin's worked in a different department, the real reason spread throughout the company. Feeling uncomfortable, Bob quit his job as if fleeing. Naturally, his income plummeted. Now, he's juggling several jobs, desperately paying off his debts. Despite previously being close, his family relationships also declined. Rick, completely discouraged, skipped school and hardly returned to their shabby new apartment, preferring to hang out instead. My mother-in-law no longer spoke to Bob, who had agreed to let them live with us hoping for an inheritance. The issue of stealing Kevin's wife spread among friends, and Bob, having lost all his friends, lives a lonely life. Having returned to my former workplace as a full-time employee, I work full-time without having to consider anyone else and enjoy living alone. Only now do I fully realize how difficult living with those three was. From now on, I intend to take care of myself, work comfortably, and enjoy the rest of my life.